The Zandari citadel gleamed like a jewel in the void, a fortress of obsidian and chrome that orbited a dying star. Its vast halls echoed with the whispers of galactic history, a 1,000-year-old empire brooding over the galaxy from its cold throne. Inside the high, curved walls of the negotiation chamber, the tension was palpable. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air recyclers, masking the weight of the silence. Eamon Rook stood at the center of the room, alone but for the shimmering holographic projections surrounding him, images of Earth's star systems, human colonies, and a few scattered Alliance flags from across the galaxy. His dark eyes never wavered from the towering figure sitting across from him, Empress Lyri Zalnath. Her eyes were a piercing green, cold, and calculating. A predator's gaze. Her appearance was regal, her silver hair cascading down her back, and her skin a smooth, near-translucent shade that glowed faintly in the chamber's soft light. There was a quiet, unnerving power in her stillness, as if she were an immovable object that existed to impose her will upon the universe. Eamon knew this was not just another round of negotiations. The stakes were higher than ever. "We've come to an impasse, human." Lyri's voice sliced through the air, smooth as silk but carrying an unmistakable edge. "You've failed to understand the nature of your position. You will either bow before the Zandari Empire or face extinction. The choice is yours." Eamon's jaw tightened, but he didn't allow himself to react. He'd faced threats before, many of them, but this felt different. He had no doubt that Lyri was capable of following through on her threats. Still, humanity had come too far to simply bend the knee. Not to anyone. He leaned forward, his fingers grazing the edge of the polished table between them. His voice was calm, his words carefully measured. "Empress Lyri, peace is still possible. If you're willing to entertain the idea. Humanity has no desire for war." Lyri's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Peace? You mistake tolerance for peace, Rook. We've been patient with your species. But now, it's time to acknowledge the reality. You are nothing but a nuisance in the grand scheme of things." Her words stung, but Eamon kept his composure. He had seen the arrogance of the galaxy's ancient empires before. It was a dangerous thing, this belief in their own invincibility. The Zandari might be powerful, but they weren't invulnerable. Humanity had its own strengths, adaptability, creativity, and a willingness to fight for survival. "You misunderstand," Eamon replied evenly. "We aren't interested in your power. We only seek to ensure that our existence isn't threatened. We've created alliances, built our systems, and you have done nothing but extend the reach of your insignificant species." Lyri interrupted, her voice cutting through his. "In my empire, you will kneel or be crushed. Do not waste my time, human." Her words landed like a slap, but Eamon met her gaze unflinchingly. He knew the game. He knew the Zandari way. They were old, powerful, and believed their empire was unassailable. But they underestimated the human's capacity to adapt, to learn from every mistake, to outwit any enemy. Eamon had to make her see that this would not be a simple negotiation. Lyri's expression grew darker, and she leaned back in her chair. "I've grown tired of these pointless talks, Rook. You've made your position clear, and I've made mine. The galaxy doesn't need another weak, insignificant species crawling for survival." Eamon felt a flicker of anger rise, but he stifled it quickly. "I'm not here to beg for survival," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'm here to offer an alternative, one where both of our peoples can coexist, without fear of annihilation. If you insist on war, we will fight. But it will not be the easy victory you believe it will be." The air between them thickened, as if the very molecules were aware of the gravity of the conversation. Lyri's fingers tapped lightly on the arm of her chair, her gaze fixed on Eamon. There was something calculating in her eyes, as if she were considering whether or not to wipe humanity off the face of the galaxy right then and there. "You mistake my patience for weakness," Lyri finally said, her voice a deadly whisper. "You will either comply with my terms, or I will destroy your people. It's as simple as that." Eamon didn't flinch. He'd expected her to say this. It was a standard Imperial tactic, intimidation. But the more she pressed, the more the cracks in her veneer began to show. She was confident, but there was an underlying desperation in her words, a fear that she wouldn't openly acknowledge. The Zandari Empire was old, yes, but it was also decaying. It was far from the unstoppable juggernaut it once was. "You think you can break humanity with threats, but you're mistaken," Eamon said quietly. "You're not dealing with a species that crumbles under pressure. You're dealing with humans. And we will not go quietly into the night." There was a long silence. Lyri's lips tightened, her posture stiffening. Her pride, her arrogance, they were beginning to falter under the weight of his calm defiance. "Very well," she said finally, her voice colder than before. "You have two choices, Rook. Submit or prepare for war. I shall return in 3 days with my final demands." Eamon stood, his face betraying no emotion, but inside, his mind raced. He had expected Lyri's threats, but the clarity with which she'd issued them only confirmed what he feared. The Zandari were preparing for a confrontation. A confrontation they were too confident in winning. But humanity had a history of defying expectations, and if it came to war, Eamon would make sure that the Zandari would regret underestimating them. "I'll await your return," Eamon replied. "But don't mistake our silence for submission. You're dealing with humanity now, Empress. And we don't kneel." With that, he turned and walked out of the chamber, the heavy doors sliding shut behind him. The defiant star hummed as it drifted through the endless void, a sleek silhouette against the swirling expanse of stars. Eamon Rook sat at the bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic display before him, a projection of the Zandari fleet, now moving closer to Earth's borders. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath, but for Eamon, this was just another moment in the relentless march of history. "Sir, we've intercepted another transmission from the Citadel," Lieutenant Harris announced, breaking the heavy silence. "It's from Empress Lyri." Eamon straightened in his seat, his fingers tapping once on the armrest. "Put it through." The hologram flickered to life. Empress Lyri's face appeared, her expression cold as the void itself. The transmission was brief, but her message was clear: the deadline for humanity's response is now final. Choose submission, or prepare for annihilation. Eamon closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the words settle on his shoulders. The negotiations had failed, and now Lyri's terms were set in stone. There was no more room for diplomacy. Humanity was facing the edge of a knife, and the question was whether it would fall to one side or the other. "Options, Commander?" Eamon asked, his voice calm but tinged with a quiet urgency. Commander Lila Dre, standing nearby, met his gaze. She was a seasoned strategist, sharp and intuitive, and she wasn't one to speak lightly. "We have the fleet on standby, but we're outmatched. Their numbers alone are staggering. If it comes to a battle, we'll be fighting for survival, not victory." Eamon nodded. He had known this for days, but hearing it from someone else made the reality even clearer. The Zandari fleet was one of the largest in the galaxy, and their military technology was far beyond humanity's. Yet, this wasn't about a conventional battle. This was about survival. Humans had something the Zandari could never predict: creativity. "Make contact with the Alliance leaders. We need a unified front," Eamon ordered. "And bring in the tech team. I want every available resource to be redirected to countering their communications network. If they think they can take us out easily, we'll show them just how wrong they are." As the crew moved to execute his orders, Eamon's mind raced. Lyri had underestimated humanity from the beginning. Peace had never been her true goal. This was a test of will, of dominance. She sought to break humanity, to force them to kneel. But Eamon wasn't prepared to let that happen, not on his watch. Back on Earth, the United Coalition Council had gathered. Representatives from every allied species sat around a circular table, each one silent as Eamon's transmission played across the room. "She's given us an ultimatum." Eamon's voice came through, steady and unwavering. "The Zandari are prepared to annihilate us unless we submit. But we're not submitting. Not now, not ever." Counselor Rao Vanner, the aging diplomat from the Seldari, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Amen, this isn't a decision to be made lightly. The Zandari will not hesitate. Their fleets are powerful beyond anything we've faced. I know, Amen said firmly. But they've underestimated our resolve. Humanity has a history of defying odds. We won't be bullied into submission. The question is, how do we survive this? Asked Ambassador Kalia, the young but sharp-eyed leader of the Terathians. What are our options? Aemon stood up, his image projected in the center of the room, his face illuminated by the flickering holograms. We'll fight, but not like they expect us to. Our strength isn't in our numbers or our firepower, it's in our ability to adapt. Our people can outthink any foe, and that's what we're going to do. He turned to the large holographic map of the galaxy, fingers tracing the projected paths of the Zandari fleet. We can't win this with sheer force, but we can throw them off balance. They rely on outdated communication systems. We're going to hack into their networks and sow confusion. If we can disrupt their command structure long enough, we might be able to delay their attack until our forces are in place. Counselor Vanna raised an eyebrow. You think you can disrupt their entire fleet with cyber tactics? Not just their fleet, Aemon replied, his voice full of confidence. Their command centers. If we can infiltrate their core communications, we'll force them into a state of chaos. Their military relies on precision. If we can fracture that precision, we might just create enough doubt to buy us some time. That's all we need, time to build our defenses. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Humanity's top engineers and hackers worked in tandem with allies from across the galaxy to implement the plan. It was bold, risky, and perhaps reckless, but it was the only option they had. Meanwhile, the Zandari fleet continued its advance, a looming presence on the edge of human-controlled space. Aemon watched as their ships grew larger on the digital maps. They weren't waiting any longer. The countdown was in full swing, and every second felt like an eternity. A few hours before the deadline, the Alliance's tech team finally succeeded in breaching the Zandari communications network. The plan was simple but dangerous. Insert a series of false transmissions into the fleet's command channels, causing a cascade of confusion. The key was timing. If they missed the window, everything would fall apart. We're ready, sir, said Lieutenant Harris, her voice tight with nerves. We've infiltrated their secondary channel. Uploading false data now. Do it, Aemon commanded, his pulse quickening. The transmission went out, cascading through the Zandari fleet's communications channels like a virus. What followed was chaos. Messages scrambled, orders crossed, and fleet commanders issued contradictory commands. The Zandari, who prided themselves on their cold precision, suddenly found themselves at a loss. Their military network was unraveling at the seams. Aemon watched, his eyes narrowing with a cold smile. It was working. For now, they had disrupted the Zandari's perfect order. But the countdown was still ticking. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. We don't have much time. We fight, not just to survive, but to show them who they're dealing with. As the final moments approached, the Defiance star powered up its engines, ready to face the approaching storm. Aemon didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure: humanity would not fall without a fight. The Zandari had made their mistake. Now they would learn just how costly it would be. The Defiance star cut through the darkness, its sleek frame pushing ahead of the human fleet. Aemon stood in front of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the screens displaying the chaos now unfolding within the Zandari fleet. It had worked. For the first time in days, there was a crack in the enemy's armor, a momentary lapse in their once immovable strength. Reporting in, Commander Lila Dre's voice came over the comms, sharp and focused. The Zandari fleet's coordination has completely fractured. We've intercepted a dozen conflicting orders. Their formations are in disarray. Aemon's lips curled into a tight smile, but it didn't last long. The victory was temporary. He knew the Zandari were not the type to crumble easily. They would regroup, adapt, but that would buy humanity precious time. Time to prepare. Good, Aemon replied, his voice steady. Hold the line. We've got a few more tricks to play before they can recover. He turned to the crew working at their stations, their faces a mix of relief and tension. The human fleet, while smaller, was not without its advantages. Their ships were nimble, designed for guerrilla tactics, and now it seemed like the perfect moment to strike. Lieutenant Harris, send out the signal to the other fleets. We're going to hit them hard but fast. No prolonged engagements. We need them to think we've got more firepower than we really do. Aye, sir, Harris replied, her fingers flying over the controls. Across the galaxy, the Zandari fleet was reeling. Their command center, once the nerve center of their operations, was now a tangled mess of contradictions. Fleet commanders were yelling at each other through disjointed transmissions, orders from the Empress contradicting those from their top generals. Chaos reigned within the mighty fleet, but it wouldn't last forever. The Zandari were methodical, and it was only a matter of time before they regrouped. Empress, the communications network is... A high-ranking officer paused, glancing at the data streaming in. Completely compromised, Your Majesty. We've lost contact with multiple ships. Fleet coordination is minimal. We don't know what the humans are doing. Lyri's cold gaze never wavered from the holographic map in front of her. Her empire had been struck in the one area she hadn't anticipated, their technological superiority. Get it under control, she snapped, her voice like ice. I will not let a species of primitives ruin everything we've worked for. Regroup the fleet. Find those responsible for this failure and make an example of them. Her officers nodded quickly, but the unease in their eyes betrayed their true feelings. The Zandari were a powerful empire, but even they weren't immune to human ingenuity. They had underestimated the resourcefulness of the species they thought they could crush with a single swipe. Back aboard the Defiant Star, Eamon paced back and forth in the command center, his mind turning over the next moves. The clock was ticking. The Zandari were on their way to recovering, and they would not take kindly to the humiliation. Sir, Commander Dre's voice broke his thoughts. We've received a direct transmission from the Zandari fleet. It's personal. Lyri is requesting a final ultimatum. Eamon narrowed his eyes. He had expected this. The Zandari Empress would never be one to back down without a final statement of power. Play it, he ordered. The holographic projection flickered, and Lyri's face appeared once again, her expression colder than ever. This time, there was no diplomacy in her tone, just a promise of wrath. You think you've won, human? Lyri's voice was a low, venomous hiss. This galaxy does not belong to your kind. You have delayed the inevitable. But know this, no matter how many tricks you play, no matter how many transmissions you corrupt, your fate is sealed. You will bend the knee, or I will make an example of your species that will echo for centuries. Her image disappeared, leaving the room heavy with silence. Eamon felt the weight of her threat settle over him, but he refused to show any sign of fear. It's exactly what we expected, Eamon said, his voice even. Now we show them just how wrong they are. They want to make an example of us? Let's give them one they won't soon forget. The next few hours passed in a blur of calculated chaos. Eamon and his crew launched a series of hit-and-run missions against the fragmented Zandari fleet. Their ships, smaller but faster, darted in and out of battle, striking vulnerable targets, creating more confusion and fear. It was guerrilla warfare at its finest, a tactic the Zandari, with all their might, hadn't expected. Eamon's mind raced as he watched the Zandari respond, their forces struggling to reorganize. With every passing hour, the imbalance between their fleet and humanity's became more apparent. The Zandari were used to overwhelming power, not this cunning and unpredictable force. Sir, Lieutenant Harris called from her station. We've detected a significant fleet movement. The Zandari are pulling back. No, they're preparing a concentrated attack. Eamon's heart skipped a beat. The Zandari were regrouping faster than he anticipated. If they attacked with full force, the human fleet wouldn't stand a chance. How much time do we have? He asked, his voice tight. Less than an hour, sir, Harris replied, her fingers flying over her console. They've reformed into a more traditional battle formation. This is it, Their final assault. Eamon looked to his crew. They were all ready for this moment, but he knew that it wouldn't be enough. They would need a distraction, something that would give them a fighting chance. Prepare the prototype ship, Eamon said, his voice resolute. It's time to show them what humanity is truly capable of. The prototype ship was humanity's final ace in the hole, a stealth ship capable of cloaking itself from all known detection systems. It was an old prototype, unfinished and untested in real combat, but it was their best hope. If they could use it to breach the heart of the Zandari fleet, perhaps they could turn the tide. Within minutes, the prototype ship was launched into the vast expanse of space. The Zandari fleet was advancing rapidly, and their sensors swept the sky like hungry eyes. But the Defiant star had a secret weapon, one that would make the Zandari think twice before they made their move. As the prototype ship slipped into the heart of the Zandari formation, Eamon's thoughts went to one thing: time. Time to give humanity a fighting chance. They had the will. They had the ingenuity. And they weren't about to let an empire like the Zandari crush them without a fight. The calm before the storm felt surreal. The Defiant star hung in space, its silhouette barely visible against the expanse of stars. Eamon Rook stared at the holographic map of the battlefield, his mind racing. The Zandari fleet was regrouping, and humanity's options were dwindling. It would only be a matter of time before their full force was unleashed. And when it came, Eamon knew they wouldn't survive long without a decisive move. How are we on the prototype? Eamon's voice was sharp, his gaze fixed on the crew working frantically at their consoles. Lieutenant Harris looked up, sweat beading on her forehead. It's ready, sir. The cloaking system is fully functional, and the quantum drives have been calibrated. But there's a problem: the Zandari sensors are advanced. They might still pick up a deviation from their normal scanning protocols. Then we make sure they don't notice, Eamon said, his mind already calculating the risks. Give the order to deploy? We don't have much time. Commander Dre approached, her expression grave. Are we sure about this? One slip up, and we lose our last chance. We don't have another choice, Eamon replied, his voice firm. Humanity's survival depends on this. The crew around them worked in a flurry of motion, finalizing the deployment of the stealth ship. It was the only ship in humanity's fleet capable of slipping past the Zandari's immense warships, a prototype designed for situations like this. Small, agile, and nearly invisible to the enemy's sensors, the ship was their final gamble. The Zandari fleet was preparing for their final offensive. In the command center of the flagship, Empress Lyri stood before a wall of tactical displays, her cold eyes scanning the various readouts. Her officers were at their stations, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air. They're playing games, Empress, General Azara said, a hint of frustration creeping into her voice. Their attacks have been fleeting, erratic, like they're stalling. Lyri's lip curled into a slight sneer. The humans are nothing but a nuisance. Their tricks will not save them. She turned toward her fleet's commander. Prepare the fleet for full-scale engagement. We end this now. Once the humans are crushed, we can move on to more important matters. Understood, the commander replied. As the orders were given, Lyri's thoughts turned toward the humans' stubbornness. They had been nothing but pests to her empire, but even she had to admit they were clever. Their ability to improvise was both irritating and dangerous. If they had one advantage, it was that. But this time, she would not let them get away. The Zandari fleet, fully assembled, began to move. Their formation was tight, calculated, an overwhelming force designed to crush any resistance. The humans' hit-and-run tactics had delayed them, but now it was time to end it once and for all. Back aboard the Defiant star, Eamon was staring at the holographic display of the Zandari fleet, his hand clenched around the armrest of his chair. The full-scale assault was imminent, and he knew their chances of survival were slim. Humanity's best hope now rested on the stealth ship, the last weapon in their arsenal. Status report, Eamon barked. His voice cut through the tension in the room. Lieutenant Harris tapped a few commands into her console. The prototype ship has launched. It's cloaked and on course for the heart of their fleet. Eamon's pulse quickened. Keep me updated every minute. The moment we have any deviation, I want an immediate recall. He turned to Commander Dre. We need to keep them distracted. We can't let them focus entirely on the prototype ship. If we lose their attention for even a moment, that's all it'll take. Dre nodded, her eyes flashing with determination. You've got it. We'll run a few decoy maneuvers, make it look like we're pulling in reinforcements. As Eamon nodded in agreement, a new transmission flashed on his screen. It was a garbled signal from the Defiance star's sensor array, an anomaly in the Zandari fleet's movement. His heart skipped a beat. Report! He demanded, his voice tight with anxiety. The Zandari fleet has started to shift position, Harris replied. They're splitting up. Some ships are pulling back. They might have detected something. Eamon swore under his breath. It was the kind of situation where everything could collapse in an instant. But there was no turning back now. The prototype ship was humanity's last hope. Aboard the stealth ship, now nearly invisible to the Zandari's sophisticated sensors, Captain Maria Klein held her breath as she neared the center of the enemy fleet. The ship's cloaking system was working flawlessly, but every second brought them closer to detection. Status? She whispered into her comms. We're still undetected, Captain, came the calm reply from her engineering officer. The cloak is holding. We're in position. Klein's eyes darted to the display before her. The Zandari ships were arrayed in a perfect formation, as though they had been waiting for her. But it wasn't just the ships. There was something else, something that wasn't visible on any standard sensor. A low hum filled the air. Klein's fingers hovered over the controls, tension mounting. Something's wrong. Then it hit her. The Zandari had modified their sensors. They weren't just scanning for ships. They were scanning for the unique energy signatures of the stealth system itself. We've been spotted! One of the crews shouted. Their sensor pulse just hit us. Klein cursed. There was no time to turn back. They had to strike now. Deploy the EMP warhead. Now! The weapon, a last-ditch effort to neutralize the Zandari's advanced communications, was loaded and primed. Klein's hands moved quickly, activating the sequence. A moment of silence followed. Then, a blinding flash of energy erupted, and the holographic display in front of her went dark. The Zandari's fleet-wide comms were cut off, their sensors blinded by the surge of energy. We've done it, Klein muttered, a sense of disbelief mixed with relief. But the danger wasn't over. With their systems disrupted, the Zandari would be scrambling, and humanity's fleet had only seconds to capitalize on the advantage. Back on the Defiant star, the comms crackled to life. This is the prototype ship. EMP deployed. We've severed their communications. Eamon's heart pounded in his chest. The opening they needed had arrived. All units, attack! Eamon shouted, his voice rising above the roar of the bridge. Target their command ships. We're going for the heart of the fleet. Humanity's fleet surged forward, emboldened by the sudden turn of events. The Zandari, now in disarray, couldn't react fast enough. Eamon watched as his ships, fueled by the hope of survival, tore into the enemy formation, striking hard and fast. In that moment, humanity had not only survived, they had fought back.